Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the week that was on Friday, December the 3rd. My name is Saeed Khan. Welcome and happy to host you again. We are joined with, again, an august mix of regulars and others on today's show as we return from Thanksgiving and as we are coming into the closing overs of Hanukkah as well. So going around the room, we have Ven Johnson, attorney with Johnson Law. Welcome, Ven.
Thank you, everybody. How are you doing?
We're doing well, thank you. We have Ira Todd, who has just recently retired after 34 years with the Detroit Police Department, an actor, a Hollywood consultant, including Detroit 187, Beverly Hills Cop, and starred in a reality Stars TV movie, Wrong Man. About trying to prove people's innocence. Show. I stand corrected. See, I think that everything on Stars is a movie, but just like I see the show, this particular radio program as a fantasy as well, Alan. But more on that later. We have investigative journalist and just intrepid Detroiter ML Elric. How you doing, ML?
And you forgot failed city council candidate. let's get them all up there up top.
You know, if I was going to do that, I'd mention your affiliation with Michigan State as well, but I'm keeping it on the up and up.
Bull Brown Spartans, come on.
We have, of course, with us columnist Nancy Derringer in a new venue, actually just a different room.
My family room. Yes, thank you. I'm going for the room. I'm going for at least a 7.5 from Room Raider. So
not an 8 on the Richter scale.
No.
And of course, we have editor of Deadline Detroit, Alan Lingle. How you doing, sir?
Good, thanks.
Okay. Well, I wish that we could be this mirthful about everything, but of course, particularly here in the Metro Detroit area, this week has been crushingly difficult. With what happened at Oxford High School. 4 dead, 7 injured in yet another act of mass shooting and gun violence, this time by a 15-year-old sophomore, allegedly by the name of Ethan Crumbly, a community that is reeling and one that has ripple effects with several school districts off this week because of fear of other threats that have been made over social media. I don't even know where to begin because there's so many issues on that. So I'm just going to open it up to whomever would like to provide whatever observations, commentary on it. We'll start with some. How about we start with Ven?
Oh man! First and foremost, our deepest sympathies and condolences to these families and the ripple effect, y'all, which we all get, is obviously every single child in that school, the administrators, the teachers, first responders, you name it, just the scene that they had to just be a witness of. It's just horrible. None of them will ever be the same. Let's be honest. But where my brain goes, obviously the 36 years of being a lawyer, is whatever laws we have, guys, ain't working. Hello, and haven't worked in a long time. So we need to do something. I think in about a half hour here, Karen McDonald's going to do one thing. I believe very strongly she's going to charge the father for sure, since he bought apparently these guns 4 days before. In other words, 2 days before he spent the next 2 days in school with the administrators and his kid for disciplinary problems. Not working, and we need to do something now. Because I know you all know, like we talked about the school district, Oakland County, our kids as well, shut down the next day because of copycat threats, and a very, very societal message needs to be sent. We're not having this.
It's interesting. People, we've written about this, and some of the readers are like, well, what? I wrote a column saying we need to do something. We need to, first of all, fund the ATF to enforce the laws that they've been tasked with. But also, and even though this was a 9mm use, the majority of these cases, we still shouldn't ignore the fact the majority are using assault weapons, which should be banned. And whether there was an assault weapon in this case, which there was not, it's still a reminder, as we saw in Newtown, Connecticut, there was a Bushmaster, an AR-15 assault weapon used there, and they've been used in the malls and a lot of other shootings. And we have to start taking incrementally, start doing something, because as you know, but nothing, we can't do nothing, and we continue to do nothing.
Amen, Alan.
Well, I'd like to congratulate the Republican Party on successfully grooming the people of America, because at one time, when there was a shooting in a school, we were all shocked. And the Republican Party, with the aid of the NRA, decided if we can not do anything and just get through this, there'll be enough of these shootings that after a while, we just become numb to it. And while we're all in a lather and terrified, and my daughter's a student teacher, and she's wondering, what the hell am I getting myself into? And I sat through this active teacher shooting, this active school shooting training when I was at Fox 2. Some of these deputies from Oakland County came and gave us that training. And I left that training practically in tears, thinking, should a child have to sit in class and say, Mom, Dad, they told me I could be killed in school today. And they taught me how to save my own life, because I went to school where I might be murdered. And we've gone through this time and time again. And now Chuck Grassley won't let us do immediate background checks. The Republican Party, I'm sorry, for years I've been a partisan, but this is just time to stop talking like an idiot anymore. The Republican Party has decided that our children should be sacrificed at the altar of guns, which they have tried to recast as the altar of freedom. It is not the altar of freedom. And a good guy with a gun does not stop a bad guy with a gun. More too often, it's a nitwit with a gun who doesn't have good aim, kills somebody else while trying to shoot at a bad guy with a gun. This has got to stop. It's got to stop now. But you know what? It won't, because the Republican Party likes it. And it's time just to say it the way it was. They like this, because if they don't, why would they just be sitting there?
That's very powerful. And I absolutely agree with ML here. The one thing I've been hearing this week is I feel so sad and I feel so bad. And I feel a little bad because I don't feel sad. I feel angry. I'm angry like ML is angry. And I'm warning you right now, I'm going to blast through the explicit language barrier on this one. But, you know, if we could find a dipshit response that was more dipshitty than the guy in Three Rivers, who has already introduced a bill in Michigan to allow teachers and staff to carry weapons so that they can be, you know, the good guy with a gun. ML is exactly right when he says we have to start telling them, you like this happening, because you are laying this at the, you have to lay it right at their feet like a dead rat and just tell them that's, or a dead 15-year-old.
Nancy, that's because we need more guns, right? We don't need less guns.
Exactly. I know, I realize that. But my point is, I mean, it's so appalling to me that this is what this country has come to. And I feel very depressed, because I feel like nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change, because it never changes. And, you know.
I have a question for Ira Todd. Ira was on the police force and a homicide detective for a long time. I mean, we're seeing these mass shootings, which we should be incredibly alarmed about. What we aren't alarmed about is the city of, like, places like Detroit, where every night, and maybe you can address it, Ira, that, you know, we see multiple shootings every night in the city.
Oh yeah, you know, I think people don't realize this is the norm for major cities. When you have it out in the suburbs and things like that happen, people start screaming and hollering all the time. But it's happening all the time. And you know, we talk about the Republican Party, you know, liking this. Well, they created this. They created all this hate, this anger, and all this stuff that's going on. And even to the point where people are talking about defunding the police and all this other kind of crap, this nonsense that's going on. Now they don't even respect the police anymore. So who enforced the law? We don't have anybody to enforce the law anymore, you know, because nobody respects the police. You got these young kids out here that's angry, they're mad, they're confused, they're mixed up. So what do we do right now? What's the solution to the problem?
You know, we were at Michael Lucido and I. We did a video story on Greektown, and you know, one guy's got an open carry. They were busting people with guns, and everybody feels like, I need a gun because that person's got a gun. And where do we start to remove some of those guns so everyone doesn't feel the need to have a gun.
And they turn these guns into toys now. Like you said, everybody got guns. They walking around, they're brandishing their guns. They're walking around playing soldier. And you have these cowards out here that, you know, they want to use these opportunities to kill innocent people and get this name recognition or something like that. It's all because of these guns and this hateful environment. People are tired. People are afraid. There's a lot of anxiety going on here. You know, we learn how to bash the police. We learn how to beat up the police because they're the political pawns in all of this. So now nobody respects the police or the law. So it's like we got to get back to basics. You know, too many people have guns out here. I know a lot of gun advocates get mad at me for saying that, but I think if you're not law enforcement, you should be out here toting a gun. You should be trained, you know, unless you're in the military or something. You want a gun, go to the military or hunting or something like that. But just walk around in urban environments, neighborhoods, and everything else with guns and assault rifles. What is this country coming to? It's getting ridiculous.
So picking up on that, Ira, I mean, 40 years ago, I was in high school in Lapeer, same high school that the Nichols brothers went to of Oklahoma City bombing fame. And I remember my freshman year, the toughest kid in school decided to take on two, what back then they used to call burnouts, who were brothers, said, meet me outside at 3:00. And they dutifully complied by meeting him for what was going to be a brawl. I used a payphone to call my mom and said, hey, Mom, don't pick me up in school right after classes get done. I got to stick around to
watch this fight.
I didn't tell her that, but I should have gotten a grade for it. But that was my first bout with FOMO. And, you know, he knocked one of the brothers out in one punch and the other in like a cartoon put up a white flag. Next day, everything was back to normal. They nodded at each other just like that cartoon with the sheepdog and the wolf that used to go to work together from 9 to 5. I mean, there was something to be said about those kinds of fights and the etiquette of conflict that would then be solved or resolved in one way or the other at that time. And this was in a pretty heavily armed city and county. What's happened in these 4 decades?
I think people have become cowards. People are afraid nowadays. So everybody totes a gun. Everybody's afraid to fight. Like you said, people would fight, get back together, go have some drinks or something like that. Now everybody, excuse me, something on here.
Well, Ira, you and I have had discussions about, you were talking about in the old days, police were able to confront people without pulling out their guns, and now a lot of the cops are just, you know, they're guys who have come from the country, the army, whatever, and they're afraid and they pull out their guns. They're afraid to deal with people out on the streets.
And it's the attitude that's going on now. Back in the day, you could tell somebody, hey, look here, you know, let's move on, get off the corner, no hanging out. You know, you didn't get a lot of lip. And if you got lip back then, you could address it differently. I know it's a different time right now, but people didn't disrespect officers like they do right now. The officers didn't have to explain every situation that's going on. You know, hey, why are you pulling me over? Well, right now, I might not have a time, the moment to tell you why I'm pulling you over, because I got information that maybe 6 people in this car are armed with weapons. So I'm trying to do my job. But now cops got to explain every little movement they do. They got to kiss butt out here. And this is what happens. You get the people to start taking the laws in their own hand. You get people out here crazy with guns. They get mad at somebody. They don't call the police anymore. We handle it ourselves. It's been going on too long, you know, and it's frustrating.
So then you mentioned that Prosecutor McDonald is probably going to be lodging charges against the father. There's a lot of attention, obviously, on the parents in this, and even some light is being shed on the mother, particularly with what's being inferred as her ideological slant, shall we say. Nancy, I know we were talking before about this. Have you seen anything come across the wire about it?
Are you talking about this blog that she allegedly wrote?
I am.
Yes, apparently she had a blog that was active for one entry 6 years ago, and Alan and I had a discussion as to whether we should be paying attention to it at all. You know, she revealed herself to be a kind of a reluctant Trumper. Her story was kind of the same story that we've been hearing over and over on these parachute in diner visits by the national media about, Joe and Jennifer who have had a hard time and aren't getting what they need from the Democratic Party, so they've voted for Trump and now they're very happy. Blah blah blah. I don't want to put too much stock in that. I mean, a lot of us write to get feelings out. A lot of us write to clarify our thinking. I'm not going to call. I think there's going to be more coming in the next few days about these parents from this alleged mountain of evidence that Karen McDonald claims to have access to. And I'm going to withhold comment until we see something that's a little more recent. Sorry.
No.
I want to, if I could throw something in, guys. I think it's not lost on most of us that when we're looking at these mass shooters and these incidents, sorry, y'all, but this is a white people thing. This is crazy people taking out their anger in some way that is obviously so highly destructive to themselves and everybody around them. And I think in addition to it being a gun thing, I think that folks, what I'll call from Saginaw hunkies, we need to take a good hard look at ourselves and say, what the fuck is going on with us that we are acting this way? And we're quick to point fingers of blame at people of color in all sorts of different other situations and so forth. But we need to step up, y'all. And we need to realize the problem right now is us. We got to figure this out. This has got to stop. This cannot be tolerated. Who's going to send their kids to school? Why would you ever send your kid to school?
Well, I mean, I was reading an article recently about how this is being framed as being part of Metro Detroit. For those of us who are local, we realize that Oxford is, I mean, as far out there on, I mean, it's past the neutral zone in Star Trek terms.
It's exurban at the best. It's exurban.
Well,
beyond suburbia.
We used to call Oxford a suburb of metropolitan Lapeer. So I mean, it's all about perspective. But I think it's a very important point because again, the stigma that exists about Detroit around the country and around the world, that somehow the other people then infer that, as Van would say, that this isn't a quote unquote white issue, that it then collapses into this again this kind of perception that it is still Detroit qua urban, qua a Black American issue. How can that be dispelled?
I've just been handed a bulletin. Prosecutor is
Kennedy dead.
This came from my husband. Just handed me his phone. Prosecutor charges parents with involuntary manslaughter.
Wow.
So that's
both parents.
Wow. Both parents. James and Jennifer Crumbly. So
there must be something there. There must be quite some evidence to reach to that level of charges.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna be really interesting, guys. Also on the civil end, sorry, here comes the civil lawyer in me, because the school was dealing with these folks for 2 straight days as to what the issue was and what they knew and what they didn't know. I will tell you from a civil standpoint, because of this horrible thing called governmental immunity, translation, you can't sue the government and the king unless he says you can. It'd be a very difficult case, but there very well might be one.
But this stuff was happening years ago when I worked Gang Squad over 30 years ago. We would hold parents accountable too. After a while, the first time we had detained a child, you come pick up your child. The second time, hey, you get a ticket or something happens, some sort of, you have some sort of responsibility in it too. They need to go back to that, holding people accountable. And I like the terrorism charge they put on this young man because you know what? Yeah. It's sending a strong message. And I think that's what we're starting to see with the courts and with the criminal justice system. We're getting back to saying, hey, look here, we're going to enforce the law. You guys can go crazy. You can second guess, create these big lies, whatever you want to do. But we're going to go back to status quo. We're going to start enforcing the law. And you guys are going to be held accountable for all this crazy madness. So that terrorism charge, I think that was one of the best things that the prosecutor could have done.
I agree with
it's revolutionary.
Yeah. It seems like the parents are subject to scrutiny here. I did some investigation into the ringleader of the Governor Whitmer kidnapping plot when I was last at the Free Press, and his mother was way out there. I mean, she was preaching a lot of right-wing yang and a lot of, Trump stuff. She was insurrection before insurrection was cool, but he was a grown man outside of the house. So to bring her into it seems like a bit of a stretch, even though I think he was still sucking at mommy's teeth and the milk was sour as hell. But in this case, the boy is 15 years old. He's under the roof. He's under the influence. And for all we know, the old man got him the gun on Black Friday with his permission. We don't know. We have to see how that plays out. But certainly this notion of if you have a gun in your house, legally or not, it should be secured. It should be under your control. And if you don't know your kid is spitting this kind of hate and you leave your gat sitting around, you've got to bear some responsibility.
I got a question. I have a legal question for Ben. Is like, what is the harm if the parents would have at least issued a statement saying, we are so sorry, this is horrible, this is a tragedy, and leave it at that? I mean, what's the liability there of them even putting that out? Would that have been a problem?
I can hear Fish screaming, no. But the answer is, I personally believe nothing. And at the very least, the lawyer should have done that for them, quite candidly. But any good criminal defense attorney, you don't talk at all. And we all know they lawyered up immediately. And to be quite honest, because of the gravity of this situation, they were smart in doing that.
Yeah. By the way, for our audience, Fish there refers to Steve Fishman, a frequent guest on the show, and not to Abe Vigoda's character back in the 1970s.
although they are starting to resemble each other more and more every year.
That's only ML. That's because he cuts his own hair. So,
Hey man, so do I.
Did he get a Flowbee for Hanukkah?
And remember, Tessio was always smarter. So.
Well, guys,
he still took the ride in the back of that Cadillac.
I think that one of the things that our legislators need to think about, a quick analogy, if any one of us loan a car to a friend, our kid, whatever, and that kid or that person driving was negligent, we under Michigan law, we call it the owner's liability statute, are automatically responsible for their negligent use or operation of the car. To me, there needs to be something like what, that's just no brainer. You give someone access to your gun and they use it inappropriately, that's on you.
We even have dram shop laws that are more strict than this. Yeah.
Can I just say, when I was a kid, I knew the exact location and contents of every book in the house that my parents didn't want me to read. The Henry Miller, the marriage manual, all that kind of stuff that we used to, that
D.H. Lawrence.
Yeah, all that stuff. And I mean, I just knew where it was. I knew where to look in my father's underwear drawer, and I expect this is where every kid in the world is. Every American kid, they just know where this stuff is. Now, well, apparently
they don't have trigger locks for Screw magazine.
They don't, and my father did not read Screw magazine. Okay, he liked Henry Miller. That's literary.
But here's Tropic Cancer in his underwear drawer.
Yes, he did. But the point is that even if it is under lock and key, that kid knows where that key is. And just because kids know where everything is in their house.
And that kid learned that behavior from those parents. Let's call it what it is. That kid learned that behavior, that hate. That's from those parents.
Right. And Ira.
And some of those folks in the community. That's what's going on. We are breeding this hate. So let's keep it real. You put a gun, you put a slingshot in his hand. They're going to try to do something to hurt you. It's all about that hate. Every parents that's breeding this next generation of hate.
Every kid who has a gun in the house, parents have a gun. The kids usually are very aware of that. My father had a bar, and he had a gun, a .38 caliber. I knew where it was in the drawer. I occasionally might, look at it, but I didn't do anything crazy with it. But kids are very aware of that because it's a scary and it's magnetizing.
People who keep handguns in the house will always say, well, it's for personal protection or to protect my family if something were to happen. It's like, but if they're secure, they have to be under at least one and preferably two locks. They should be on a trigger lock, and then the case that they're in should be locked, or the drawer, or wherever it is. It's like, what are you going to do if somebody does get into your house? It's like, fumble for your keys. Hey, could you hold that thought for a minute while I unlock my weapon here? I mean, I think a lot of the act of making them secure also makes them harder to access in a tense situation. So it's like, why have them? I mean, honest to God, I have a rolling pin that I would trust, more than a 38 caliber, whatever.
So
is that why your husband so quickly gave you that update?
No, but I've often said that when I walk into the kitchen, I said, if I were to find somebody who had just come in through the back door on the other side of the kitchen, my first lunge would be to the rolling pin, and the other to the knife block, and it would be like that Quentin Tarantino movie where they have the shootout. They have the shootout.
Which one? Because there's just that one, right?
Kill Bill. Kill Bill. Yeah, Kill Bill. Anyway.
Look, I mean, I
hate to say this, but you'd be surprised how many kids out here are toting guns, little hand pistols 24/7. But they're not going out killing multiple people at one time.
Right.
It's the mindset. It's what these people are putting in their heads. Let's keep it real. I mean, I've locked up several juveniles with toting a gun. You pull over, they throw the gun and they take off and run, or they run with the gun. These kids got a different mindset when they want to go into a place and eliminate multiple people. That's hate. That's anger. So we got to talk about the real problem here. It's not just the guns. It's the mindset of the people that's carrying these guns.
Just on a personal note, two of our really dear family friends, they live in the Oxford area, and their sons go to Oxford High. They're juniors, and in fact, they were there, and both of them knew Tate. The young man, one of the young men who lost his life. One of them had lunch with him 30 minutes before.
Oh my God.
I think that this terrorism charge is really groundbreaking. It's precedent setting because as Prosecutor McDonald said, I mean, not only they and their families, everybody's been traumatized by this.
Yeah.
And it is, as a criminal act is, it's the people versus the defendants. And when a people are traumatized, it seems as though this is quite the appropriate charge on that.
Well, think of where we've gone over the last 40 or 50 years. We used to have training in our elementary schools in big, heavy curtains because we were worried that if the Ruskies launched a nuclear strike, we need to get under our desks and all that other stuff, which of course was ludicrous. But we were being trained to protect ourselves against an attack from a foreign enemy that hated us, hated our way of life and everything we stood for. And here we are now in 2020 being trained to protect ourselves from our neighbor's kid. I mean, what the hell? Why are people not more concerned about this? This is like a movie where the ruling class sacrifices villagers every year to keep the dragons from laying waste to the village. And we just keep sacrificing the kids, and the dragons keep coming. It's time to take the village elders out and to sacrifice them and say, we're putting an end to this right now, but we won't. Chuck Grassley, Ted Cruz.
Mike
Let me tell you something.
Mike Shirky.
Yeah, if this kid is sentenced to serve time, I hope he serves it in your house.
Did you see Mike Shirky's reaction where he said, we don't want to try to eliminate all risks, or we might live in a country that we don't recognize. And I'm thinking
maybe he should go back to recounting those votes.
Yeah, I think I would welcome living in a country
that doesn't seem like as big a threat to our democracy as kids killing other kids.
Right, exactly. And I would welcome to live in a country where kids don't have to worry about these things. But
it's called every other country in the world, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they also have health care.
I wrote a column in the headline. I like the headline best of the whole column, but it said basically this is a reminder that America loves its guns more than its children, and I think that's clear. I mean, after like I say, Newtown, Connecticut. I mean, how could that not have moved the needle? And did not move the needle at all. We had a ban, I think, in 1994 for assault weapons that lasted 10 years and then expired in 2004, and we've never been able to get that ban back again. There's no reason for people, anywhere to be having assault weapons. It's just,
And around that same time, Australia banned guns, even with a conservative John Howard in power.
Right.
But I will go ahead and add as a corollary to that, Alan, that do the Russians love their children too? ML, you were saying about that they hated everything about us. I think Khrushchev loved our washing machines.
Oh,
So
okay. That explains his white socks.
Glass half full, brother.
So here's the one thing, because there's this law of unintended consequences. We had the assault weapons ban, and right after that, we got Newt Gingrich. If we finally get some gun control, we end up getting a crazy federal government as well. I mean, I just wish we could find a way for people to say. I mean, maybe it's just as simple as everybody who has a gun, if it gets out of your control, you're going to prison. If you leave it on the bedside and somebody breaks into your house and steals it, and then they rob somebody and shoot somebody, you're going to get locked up. If you
That's on you.
It can grab it, you're going to get locked up. Because to me, it's about responsibility. If you want to own a gun, you make a commitment to the rest of us that you are never going to lose track of that weapon. And if you do, you're going to pay a steep price. That's the deal that we make. And if you're not comfortable with that, guess what? We're doing everything we can to get these guns under lock and key.
It's interesting. I mean, this family had multiple guns. People break into homes and they steal guns. My father's gun. We had our house broken into and somebody stole his gun. He never got another one, but it was out. There's a stolen gun out there, and there's a lot of them out there.
If you want to be the party of personal responsibility, that should include control and possession of your weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that party is doing is going ahead and stacking the court so that you have decisions like the Heller case that came out, which basically laid waste to the first clause of the Second Amendment. But it's also an institution, the U.S. Supreme Court, that just this week and on Tuesday, the same day as Oxford, in a different realm, was looking at an issue regarding life. And that, of course, is the Mississippi abortion case. With a fairly interesting oral argument on that. So where do we stand with a case which I'm sure is not going to be decided until the very last day of the term in June? But there's going to be a lot of speculation until then about where it goes.
Now, my understanding is the way the Republican Party feels is life is sacrosanct until you go to a public school and can get shot by a classmate.
Right.
Yeah, basically, that's really what it is.
Right.
Or until you're born, at which point they don't care about you either.
And I think maybe we should co-opt the term pro-life and use it for, protecting our children, and really even take it a step further to vaccinations. To say, I'm pro-life, I'm for vaccinations. It's the hypocrisy is so deep.
I thought Justice Alito's remarks were, and this is a euphemism, were interesting, in which he said that the fetus has an interest in potential life that deserves to be protected.
Really?
I don't know if anyone caught that. I think it was eclipsed by Amy Coney Barrett's statement about, well, what about adoption?
Well, it was also eclipsed by her saying that since every state now had what they call safe haven laws, where a woman can, who has a newborn that she can't take care of, she can surrender it. You've seen these boxes that they have at police stations and so forth that you can put your newborn into like a box, kind of like a mailbox, and it alarms somewhere and somebody will come and get it and you can walk away without having to worry about that. She said, because every state has that now, that we just don't need to worry about this sort of thing. I mean, this has been a really bad week for news, but I really think that Roe v. Wade is dead, and it may end up being, the proverbial dog that caught the car. I mean, this might be the thing that finally turns the so-called swing voters permanently against the Republican Party, because legal abortion is overwhelmingly supported in this country by about 66%, I'll say 2/3% of American adults believe that it should be a legal option for women who need it, and it's none of their business, and it's up to her to decide. But that's going to go away, and what's going to end up with is this patchwork.
That's
yeah.
where we go back to. We have the assault weapons ban. We get Gingrich. We outlaw abortion. We get a very liberal or a very democratic legislature. People do things that they think are going to solve problems, and they sometimes just create a different problem for themselves.
That's true. Well,
it'd be better if we didn't have the problems in the first place.
Yeah, but we're going to end up with a patchwork. And I think that Michigan, you guys who've lived here all your lives, I believe we have a standing ban on the books here. So we'll be one of those states where you cannot get a legal abortion. New York legalized it, years earlier. The politics of legal abortion in the early 70s is actually very interesting. I heard a podcast about this. It was overwhelmingly something that happened in states with Republican governors, because at the time, Democrats were beholden to the Catholic vote, and the Catholic vote was opposed to legal abortion. But, Republicans back then still had a semblance of sanity and, believed that it was a matter of personal privacy. So
I've got a question for Ben. We're seeing some talk about now the Democrats are seeing how biased the Supreme Court is. They're talking about either term limits or adding Supreme Court justices to sort of balance off this incredible imbalance right now. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, a huge, broad question. Well, we had Michigan serves as a perfect example for what happens when you politicize the judicial branch. John Engler was by far the most successful governor ever in Michigan's history. Don't forget, he had 3 terms before they changed the term limit to 2. And my recollection is 222 judges that he hand selected. Absolutely turned Michigan law, but especially civil law, upside down and went 180 degrees the opposite way. So what we now see is Trump and the Republican Party gets to do the same thing that we've gone through with the United States, with our Michigan Supreme Court. They're now, the opposite way with the Republicans. So it's a horrible idea. It doesn't matter which side does it. It is a bad idea. And we got to get back to choosing judges and justices for real reasons as opposed to political reasons. And it's predictable. And if they get away with this in terms of overturning Roe versus Wade, or whether they claim they are or not, or partial, we all know they did. And I hope that people finally wake up and respond accordingly and put people in there that will now go the other way.
Well, I mean, the Senate confirmation hearings now have pretty much been exposed for being meaningless. Either there are no questions asked whatsoever, or there are these less than artful dodges or calumny going all the way back to Thomas saying, "Yeah, I never really thought much about Roe v. Wade," in his 1991 confirmation.
Oh yeah, sure.
And there's well, I think Ginny does.
He never drank Coke by the can either.
Well, I think Ginny does all the thinking for him, his wife. But the fact that the kind of judicial rigor of names like Learned Hand and Brandeis and Frankfurter and Brennan, I don't think that law students are really going to be reading that much about those kinds of intellectual giants on the courts in the last generation or so.
That's cold comfort to us who are living before those tomes are written.
Yeah. We're definitely in the eye of the storm. So on June 30th, where do you see things going then? Predictions?
I don't think it's any question that they are either going to A, overturn Roe versus Wade, or B, they'll claim they're not and really do it by the way in which that this part of the law works or what have you. So I don't think it's even a close call. Some of the questions, and Nancy said it perfectly, the questions that were asked were so freaking ridiculous. It's just mind numbing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you look at the asinine, they turned their heads on the Texas case and did not want to have a stay on that. I mean, and that was for 6 weeks. you know, that you can't get an abortion after 6 weeks. This is 15 weeks in Mississippi. That for sure falls within the acceptability of this very extremely conservative Supreme Court.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the thing is, the irony is that the women who choose to have abortions at that late date, that second trimester date, are almost always women who have received a terrible medical diagnosis. It's the worst day of their lives, and they truly do have to make that choice between, you know, carrying a pregnancy that might kill the mother, but it's certainly giving birth to a child that will not live very long. And you know, it's awful. And you know, we're down to like only 2 or 3 doctors that will even in the whole country that will even perform some of these procedures. So it's if the Michigan legislature in its wisdom doesn't invoke a similar law similar to the Texas one, I volunteer to drive anybody through the tunnel and over to Canada, where they can get this procedure done legally and safely. But you know, I don't want to get sued for $10,000. So we'll see.
Any other predictions on this? I actually think that I think that the decision is going to be like a Tom Friedman article. I think it's going to be kind of wishy-washy. Because if the court is this politicized, I think they're going to be mindful that this is a midterm year, and as I think you aptly said, Nancy, I mean, this could unleash the Kraken.
Yeah.
Not what's her face, Sydney.
The Democratic Kraken, yes.
Yeah.
But the idea then that do they really want this to become such an issue that could galvanize the Democratic Party going into 2022?
Well, so I haven't followed every question and every answer and every turn of this, but my understanding is Brett Kavanaugh, who it seems like still does enjoy beer, sometimes during working hours, suggested that maybe this is something where each individual state should determine where the deadline, if you will, falls. And that seems like a way to kind of throw it back to the states. If my understanding of that is accurate, the only thing I would like to suggest to Justice Kavanaugh is that at one time this country thought it was adequate for the states to determine whether men and women should be free or owned by other men and women. And I think there are some questions that should not be left up to individual states. And if we're talking about life and liberty, those are universal, and that we need a decision that addresses that. And I hope that the decision that they come up with is one that understands that everybody should have the right to determine the course of their own life, free of government interference. But if you're asking me to put money down on it, hey, I would have bet on Penn State and Ohio State last weekend, so I'm the wrong guy to make predictions. and thank God I was wrong on the Penn State bet. But I have a feeling that this is not going to end this conversation, and that we're going to find a whole new thing to get really, really angry with each other about.
Mm-hmm.
Ven, I've got a legal question for you. I mean, if then following Alito's reasoning, and if the fetus in fact does have that interest, and if that interest by the fact that it is then going to be carried to term would arguably supersede that of the woman's interest, the mother's interest, isn't that a form of involuntary servitude, which means that this would be a violation of the 13th Amendment?
Ooh, interesting.
I that's way too deep for me, guys, on a Friday. But it's whatever they say it is, right, guys? That's the really scary part. This is the human side of what we're talking about. It's the law is going to be whatever the 5 say it is, or 6 in this case.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Alan, do you got a prediction on this?
I think the court is so lopsided. I just don't see them doing the right thing. Which, I mean, it's interesting when they interview Amy Coney Barrett, and they all feign this like, oh no, I will adhere to the laws of the land and stuff like that. It's like they pick the most religious conservative person they can find who's clearly who has a record of being anti-abortion. How else is her and Alito all these people, it's just insane. It's such hypocrisy. The whole process is, you guys have said, earlier, the whole Senate hearings it's hypocritical. They're all like, oh no, I adhere to the law. I respect the law. Well, bullshit. You don't respect the law. You're just politicians disguised as judges.
Well, here's a thought, and I think Kavanaugh may have touched on this. It is time for the law to be said. It is time for our elected officials to make some decisions, some hard decisions, some thoughtful decisions, and stop leaving it up to these Supreme Court justices who get by there to that spot, as we've seen in the last several years, in a process that makes a mockery of justice. Mm-hmm. It's about time for our lawmakers to actually do their jobs and just give us a law.
But you also have to deal with the zealots and the cuckolds. I'm talking about Kevin McCarthy, but that's a whole different show. On to learning a little bit of Greek. We're up to Omicron. I don't know if anybody tracks the names of hurricanes as assiduously as we're tracking the different variants of COVID-19, but we are up to a new variant, one that South African researchers have done an amazing job in both the speed and the accuracy of identifying, one that has about 30 different mutations, it seems, but one that at the same time seems to be containable, provided people are fully vaccinated and boosted. Is the kind of measures that are being taken now, both by the Biden administration here and in other parts of the world, a little bit of an excessive reaction to this?
No. I think, look, New York City's got the vaccine passports. Nancy had quite a bit of experience in France with passports. I was at the bagel factory in Ferndale the other day, and it's like half the people aren't wearing masks. And I'm like, hey, have you heard there's a pandemic? At least for a few minutes, wear a mask. I mean, we're just, we have an advisory out by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services saying you should wear a mask. Well, when you have advisories, even less people, it's better to have something that says you have to wear a mask inside, knowing that some people won't, as opposed to having an advisory where only a few will. That's my opinion.
Lingle, it should be said, has been extremely COVID avoidant over the course of this pandemic. So that's. But I agree with him. I mean, it's. I don't want to say anything about Omicron because we just don't know enough about it. We know that it exists. We don't really know how much more transmissible it is than Delta, how severe the illness is that it leads to. All that stuff is unknown, and I feel like it's almost irresponsible to speculate too much on that. But the one thing I think Alan is absolutely right about is I went in to pick up a pizza last night, for dinner, and it was masks not required. Come on in. Sure. And I'm just like, I don't want to go anywhere where people aren't, taking this stuff seriously because, we're indoors now. It's cold outside, and we're seeing the cases go up. So
I'm in Chicago. You have to wear a mask if you go into a store. You have to wear a mask if you go into a restaurant. Everybody I see walking around is wearing a mask. Everybody seems perfectly comfortable. Nobody's suffering untoward because of this. And guess who has a lower infection rate than Michigan does?
You're kidding.
I mean, Michigan, Whitmer has gotten so, she's backed off. She was being so forceful in the beginning, and now she's so afraid of election time that she is not going to please the people who hate her. She's not going to bring them around, but those who have been supporting her are questioning why she isn't being more forceful, and she may lose those votes.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. I mean, Shirky, with no sense of irony and with full-on hypocrisy, accused Whitmer of not doing more.
They're doing the same thing with Biden. This is clearly some kind of memo that they're all following. So, yeah.
Well, the talking points seem to be the same. But part of it is also, I was reading up on the UK. So now, as anyone who enters the UK has, even if they're fully vaccinated, needs to get a PCR test within 2 days of arrival, and they need to self-isolate until they get a negative test result. The problem, though, is that they give you a 2-day window, and you have to get onto public transport when you land from London in order to get to a clinic where you can get the test. Or because if you're getting the home test delivered to a house or to a hotel, you still got to get onto some kind of public transport to get to your test. So I'm not really sure how practical and logical some of these measures are being taken and how that's going to affect.
PCR is the longer threshold test, the more accurate.
That's the one where they definitely strike oil.
Yeah, but it also takes longer, correct?
You can actually get same day results, but usually 24 hours is now
right. But it's not the 15-minute one. So why don't they have like a bank of stations set up in the airport? You know, you could get it done, mask up, go to wherever you're going, isolate till you get your negative test. And
they do have it at Heathrow, but it would just be as crazy as some of the lines in passport control. Actually, they should just go ahead and test people as you're in those crazy lines at passport control.
Sure, why not?
I would be
my nephew went to Israel. I'm trying to remember, it was last year, whatever. He had to quarantine immediately through the government for two weeks in a hotel room.
And it's on his dime, right?
No, I think the government paid for it, though.
Okay, because Australia and the UK and others, it's on your own dime, and it can be into the thousands. Someone I know went back to Australia when they finally had a window open. His flight on Qatar Airways was $4,000.
Oh my God!
And then he had to isolate in a designated hotel in Melbourne, and he had only what he had with him inside, and so he was doing his laundry in his sink. So
sounds like he would have been isolated anyway.
So Ira, what's your thoughts on all this? Should there be stricter?
Alan, you know me. I've been wearing masks a couple of years before all of this. You know, I'm German-phobic, so. But no, I think people should just support everybody in trying to beat this whole little deadly disease, because I'm telling you, you walk into places and you got to think about something. I'm an old folk now, and I'm just looking at some of these young people just breathing on you and playing around, people just sneezing in grocery stores, and they got to start thinking about some of the older people or some of the people with pre-existing conditions and things like that. So it's not just about them; it should be about somebody else too.
But you were in the grocery store early on, and you had the shield, and weren't some people like mocking you or something?
Oh yeah, a guy with remember the QAnon hat or something that was had on. They were stocking up like 2 or 3 grocery baskets, and they looked at me like I was crazy. But I was like, okay, I'm still here, So.
I think that's crazy, Ira.
So everybody needs a gun for protection, but a mask, whoa, hey, now you're getting crazy. Okay, I got it now. I'm glad I was able to take this time out of my busy unemployed loser candidate schedule, because none of this shit made sense to me to this very moment. Now it's clear.
It's all about the country is divided right now. You got to think about the country.
So that means the ideal American is a bank robber, ML. I mean, mask and gun.
Yeah, but then you got to worry about the dye packs. So it's always something.
Okay. Well, I mean, not that I'm apologizing, because these were really important talks, but just some of the things to let our audience know that we couldn't address today. Dr. Oz running for Senate in Pennsylvania. The Women's Tennis Association suspending tournaments in China because of Peng Shuai and her whereabouts. And we have a new republic in the world. Barbados has now finally sloughed off Her Majesty the Queen of England. Prince Charles had to very ignominiously go there and realize what he's not going to get when he takes over for mommy. But the great news from that is my immortal beloved Rihanna was declared a national hero, as she well should be. Which means that now, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to say, we can always count on you, Saeed, to aim this show toward Blighty. It's like we never miss an England story under here.
Cue the Gilbert and Sullivan, because I am an Englishman. I remain an Englishman. Well,
right.
with that, let's go ahead and cue it up for.
And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Okay, I'm just guessing, ML, who your Schmuck of the Week is. And so I'm going to do a Karnak, but go for it.
No, I don't know who you have in mind because I have so many to choose from. It'd be tough to pick one of them. But I'm going to name West Point cadets who kidnapped the goat that is the mascot of the Navy Academy. This is the second time they kidnapped the goat before the big Army-Navy game. And it's particularly schmucky because the leader of the service academy said, we don't do these kind of things, and put out a letter saying, this is not what we do. We're ashamed. This goes against everything we stand for. He put that letter out after the first caper, promising it would never happen again. It has happened again. And the thing about the letter is it's the same letter they put out about 15 years ago when they said, this is not the type of thing we do. It goes against everything we stand for. And so we will never, ever kidnap another service academy's
Goat
mascot. So when it comes to schmucks, I would just like to say the cadets who kidnapped Bill, the 37th and the 38th, for the second time this year, you are the GOAT schmuck, the greatest of all time schmucks.
Is the goat being well cared for? Are they sending proof of life videos with a newspaper in front of it?
All I know is they asked him how he was feeling, and he said, not bad.
I just want to read the confession of the West Point cadet channeling Blade Runner, where he says, I've done questionable things. Okay, Ira, who's your Schmuck of the Week?
I say Ethan Crumley. I think
Okay.
he destroyed a lot of lives. And I know people don't want to say his name, but I think we should say his name.
Yep.
And we should remember what he did, and he should be one of the first to get convicted of terrorism in the United States. I'm serious about that.
Okay.
Yeah. I had somebody, a friend, who said we shouldn't publish a picture, we shouldn't mention the name. But I said, people want to know who it is. And I said, and parents should be aware that, evil doesn't always look like evil. That you should pay attention to your children, that your children don't have to look like a monster to,
I have never
act
understood that mindset of don't publish, don't show him, don't this. And even Karen McDonald just said his name once and referred to him as that young man. And I just, that's ridiculous. It's like, oh, Nicole Simpson was killed by a former NFL running back. But
Which one?
Exactly.
we have to name him, and we have to show him. I think the less of that we do, the better. But here's why, because it goes back to something Ben said earlier in the show. Because if we don't, everybody's going to say it's Saeed.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, these mass shootings don't happen in Detroit. They're not committed by black and brown people. They're committed by crazy ass little white shitbags in the suburbs.
True.
Yeah.
It's time to face that.
Yeah.
True that.
Except that I almost got implicated in this because I wear black. So, there was that problem as well.
That's just your fascination with Bauhaus shining through.
I think
Absolutely.
I think we have to name him for a lot of different reasons too. I think, if he was coming from a black neighborhood, and if he was black, I'm gonna call it out right now, he would have been named. He'd have been named, posted all over the place.
Right, absolutely.
He'd been named, judge, his family been named, his family been out there doing everything. They would identify everything. I think we protect the suburbs a little bit more when something happens to one of their kids, or their kids is a mixed up mental kid or something, instead of just a badass. And this guy came from a bunch of other badass. I'll just say it right here. He's a product of his environment. So, that's what they created. So I think we need to call them out as often as we can. Point them out, call them out. Let's try to understand, let's identify them, because some of those are some of our congressmen too. They're going to grow up to be congressmen. So I'm just calling it out like it is. Let's get about this.
And apropos your point, ML, I mean, there were media who were, tone deaf in asking the question, well, wait a minute, why terrorism as a charge? Because I think they'd already quite typecast that word and to whom it refers. So, yeah.
But you talk to every one of those kids and every one of their parents and every one of those teachers and everybody who knows those teachers. And if they don't tell you that they lived in terror, that they're terrified to go back, and that they're terrified of what could happen next, then you are not talking to the right people, or they are lying to you, because this is scary as hell. I got a 23-year-old kid who aspires to spend the next 40 years of her life in a school, and she doesn't want to carry a gun, and she doesn't want to get shot. And what the hell do I tell her? I can't make any assurances.
And those are the ones who reflexively protect those kids. I mean, it's amazing what teachers do, putting themselves in the line of fire. And then who do you have?
Kids going to school with metal detectors, armed teachers. Come on, that's not a school. That's a prison.
It is.
So, who wants that? You don't even have prison guards that walk around with guns. Why would you have teachers and principals and things like that?
Right. Right.
It's getting crazy.
Yeah.
Then who do you have for us? Schmuck of the week.
Well, Ira said it best, but just to name somebody different, it'd be the same schmuck of the week for me in the last couple of years, and that is the University of Michigan Board of Regents. While we're celebrating this amazing win over Ohio State and Big Ten championship, and potentially going into the the national semifinals and finals, we still have thousands of rape victims from Dr. Anderson and U of M that are not being appropriately taken care of. And that jumps out at me as schmuck of the week, year, and a couple of years.
Yep. I agree.
All right, Nancy.
I have two that I was going to choose from. I always like to have one in reserve in case I'm and somebody else chooses one. But I think they're running.
Were you going to say in case you're trumped?
Yes, in case.
Okay, that's what I thought you were.
But I'm going to co-nominate. I'm going to have them share the crown this week, and that is Lara Logan and Lauren Boebert, because they are both fruit of the poison tree. I think we kind of briefly alluded to Lauren Boebert's repeated slander of Ilhan Omar, calling her a terrorist, making this joke about how, well, she's not wearing a backpack. I guess that's okay. And this half-assed apology that she offered, which was rejected by Ilhan Omar for very good reason. But I have to add Lara Logan, who should know better, who was once a respected journalist and war correspondent, and went on Fox Nation, I believe, earlier this week, and compared Anthony Fauci to Dr. Mengele. And claiming that this is being said by people all over the world. They're calling me and comparing him to Dr. Mengele, which is, as I tweeted at the time, I mean, this is how the Rwandan genocide started. You dehumanize your enemy, you compare him to history's worst monsters, and the next thing you know, we have violence. There's a reason that Dr. Fauci has to travel with heavy security now, and it's because of people like that. So those are my two.
Got it. Okay, Alan.
I have to go with former Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Clark, who is now being held in contempt. I mean, the guy is not only a schmuck, but a stooge. I don't know what the Yiddish word is for that, but that he was willing to carry out Trump's plan to overturn the election. I mean, that guy is, I just think he's fucking evil. So that's...
All right.
Tell us how you really feel, Alan. Well, I was gonna pick Chuck Grassley, but I think we've given him enough oxygen, more than he deserves. So my schmuck of the week, and thank you, Nancy, for reminding me of being an Englishman, goes to Ben John from Lincolnshire, UK. He's a white supremacist who was convicted for having 67,788 different images of anti-Semitic material, violent anti-Semitic material, and bomb-making instructions. He was convicted of possessing all of this hateful right-wing content, and the judge ordered him to read classical literature, including Pride and Prejudice, A Tale of Two Cities, Twelfth Night, some Thomas Hardy, and I'm willing to bet now for you, Nancy, maybe even some Henry Miller. But that's not what makes him, that alone would have made him a schmuck of the week or the year. What makes him an even bigger schmuck is he hasn't started reading any of it, which has then raised the judge's ire even further. Which means that I think, to hold him in contempt for this, the judge should make him read and memorize the Oxford English Dictionary.
I think the only thing worse than being Darcy the Reddleman would be having to count every one of those images and keep a record of them.
Yeah.
That or diagramming Wuthering Heights.
Yeah.
What a confusing novel. But yeah, so Ben John, this one's for you. You are our schmuck of the week. So at least mine. Well, listen, that concludes the week that was. Thank you all, not only for joining us, but also for everybody who participated, bringing a little bit of levity to what has been a very dark week, but also hopefully providing for everyone an assessment of some of the issues and the challenges that we as a community here face together. So as a result of that, thank you, ML Elric, of course, for joining us. Thank you, Ira Todd. Thank you, Ben Johnson. Thank you, Nancy and Alan. Of course, back to you.
Drive home safely.
Thanks for having me.
Happy Hanukkah, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. I
Happy
appreciate
holidays,
it.
folks.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Bye.